In this video, we're going to discuss the canvas, which is this large area in the middle. This is where we do all of our drawing. This rectangle in the center of the canvas is what is called the page. The size of the page depends on the template we're using, which, as we saw, can be chosen on the welcome screen. If we don't choose a specific template, the default template is a standard A4 paper size, which has a width of 210 millimeters and a height of 297 millimeters. We can see this by looking at the rulers above and to the left of the canvas, which are currently set to millimeters. The top left of the page is at point 00 and the bottom right is at point 210, 297. We can see our mouse cursor position relative to the page more accurately by looking at the X and Y values down here on the status bar. It's hard to get my cursor on the exact point, but it's pretty close to 210, 297 now. Next to the X and Y coordinates on the status bar, we have a Z along with a text box and plus and minus buttons. These allow us to zoom in and out on the canvas. We can also type a specific zoom percentage in this box and press enter. For keyboard shortcuts, we can use the plus key to zoom in and the minus key to zoom out. To zoom with the mouse, we can hold Ctrl and right click to zoom in or hold Shift and right click to zoom out. We can also hold Ctrl and scroll the mouse wheel up and down to zoom in and out. When we zoom with the mouse, Inkscape will take into account the position of our mouse cursor. So if I move the cursor up here and zoom, Inkscape will zoom in and out around the point under the cursor. Another way to zoom is by using the zoom tool. We can get to it by clicking on the magnifying glass icon down here in the toolbox, or by pressing either the Z key or the F3 key. When we activate the tool, the cursor then changes to a magnifying glass with a plus sign in the middle, and we can zoom in to a point either by left clicking or middle clicking. We can zoom out by right clicking. If we hold the Shift key, the cursor will change to a magnifying glass with a minus sign in the middle. Now the mouse buttons have the opposite effect. So left clicking or middle clicking will zoom out, and right clicking will zoom in. We can also use the zoom tool to zoom into a particular area by clicking and dragging over the area, then releasing the mouse button. We can zoom out the same way by holding the Shift key while doing this. You might have to play around with this tool a bit to really get the hang of it. Now, because we currently have the zoom tool selected, if we look up here at the controls bar, we also have some buttons we can use for zooming. These include zoom in, zoom out, zoom 1 to 1, which will zoom to 100%, zoom 1 to 2, which will zoom to 50%, zoom 2 to 1, which will zoom to 200%, and some other options, such as zooming to fit everything we have selected, zooming to fit our entire drawing, zooming to fit our page, zooming to fit our page width, centering our page on the canvas, and going back and forth between zooms that we used before. All of these options are also always available in the View menu. I'll zoom out to 1 to 2 for now so we can see everything. To pan or scroll around the canvas, we also have a few options we can use. First, we can use the scroll bars on the bottom and right sides of the canvas. If you don't see these, you can go to View, Show Hide, Scroll Bars. Another way to pan is to hold Ctrl and use the arrow keys. To pan with the mouse, we can scroll the mouse wheel up to pan up and down to pan down. To pan left and right, hold the Shift key while scrolling the wheel. Up pans left and down pans right. We can also press and hold the middle mouse button or wheel, which will change the cursor to 4 arrows, and now we can freely pan around in any direction. We can do the same by holding the spacebar. To rotate the canvas, we can go back down to the status bar, and all the way over here on the right is an R with a text box and plus and minus buttons. The buttons allow us to rotate the canvas clockwise or counterclockwise by 1 degree increments. And we can enter a specific number of degrees in the text box. To rotate with the mouse, we can hold Ctrl and Shift and scroll the mouse wheel. Up goes clockwise by 30 degrees, and down goes counterclockwise by 30 degrees. We can also rotate the canvas by going to View, Orientation. Here we can rotate clockwise and counterclockwise, reset the rotation, lock the rotation, and flip the canvas horizontally and vertically. Now let's talk about how we can change the look of the canvas. First, if we want to change the template of our document, we can go to File, New from Template. If we click it now, it will bring up this dialog that allows us to choose a template. If we choose, for example, business card, we can choose what size business card we want, then we can click Create from Template. We now have a new document open with the business card template that we chose. Also, when we start a new document like this, it will open the new document in a new Inkscape window. As you can see, this document is titled New Document 2, and we now have two Inkscape windows open. We can switch back and forth between them through Inkscape by going to View, Previous Window, or Next Window. We can also use the shortcut Control-Tab. When we're finished with the document, we can close it out either by clicking the X at the top right or by going to File, Close. Be careful not to click Quit though, as this will close out all of the documents. Let's go ahead and close out this document. Now let's say we want to change the size of the page within our current document. We can do this by clicking this Edit Properties button in the Commands bar or by going to File, Document Properties. Clicking this will dock the Document Properties dialog over here on the right. In the Document Properties dialog, we can set the display units for the document, such as pixels, which will set the rulers to measure the canvas in pixels. I'll change this back to millimeters for now. Next, we can set the size of the page, either by choosing a preset size or by setting a custom width and height here. For example, I can type 300 for the width and 500 for the height and press enter, and it will change the size of the page. We can also choose portrait or landscape orientation for our page. Next, if we open this Resize Page to Content menu here, Inkscape gives us the option to resize the page to fit either our entire drawing or any parts of our drawing that we have selected. Just to show you an example, I'm going to create some squares on the canvas. At the moment I have nothing selected, so if I click this Resize button, the page will resize to fit all of these squares. If now I select, for example, these two squares and click Resize again, it will resize the page to fit just these two squares. And by the way, this option is also available in the Edit menu here. Back over in the dialog, we can also set the margins between the border of the page and the drawing. If this lock is open, we can set each margin individually. And if it's closed, changing one margin will change all of the other margins to the same number. If I set a margin to 10, for example, press enter, then click the Resize button. It will resize the page to fit all of the squares, but it will also leave 10 millimeters of space between the page and the squares on all sides. Next, we have options to change the scale here. Different vector graphics editors use different scaling, so if you open an Inkscape file in Adobe Illustrator, for example, the scaling might be a bit off. You can fix that by going here and setting the scale to be the same as what Illustrator uses. However, unless you switch between the two often, you will likely never need to use this, and I've never had to use it myself. Down here we can change the appearance of the entire canvas, such as by giving it a checkerboard background or by changing the background color, which we can do by clicking here and choosing another color, such as light gray. Now if you look at this bottom bar here, this is the alpha or opacity channel. It's currently on 0, so the background is considered by Inkscape to be fully transparent. This means that if we print or export the document, Inkscape won't take into account the background color of the canvas. This is useful if you just want to change the color for your own preference. For example, maybe white is too bright for your eyes, so you want to darken it some. Or maybe you plan to put your artwork on a website that has a certain background color, and you want to see how your artwork will look against that color. If we raise the opacity, however, Inkscape would then consider the background color when printing and exporting. Let's set it back to 0 for now. Over here on the right, we have options to change the border of the page. If we uncheck the Show Page Border option, it will effectively make the page invisible. We might do this if we don't care about constraining our drawing to a particular area. And the beauty of working with vector graphics is that we can always move things around and resize them without having to worry about any loss in quality. The next option is to make the border of the page always appear on top of our drawing. Right now, if I change the square to another color, such as red, and move it over the border of the page, the square will cover that part of the border. However, if I check this option, the border now appears on top of the square. Next, we can toggle on or off the border shadow, which is this gray area on the right and bottom of the page. Finally, we can change the color of the border by clicking this color swatch and choosing a different color. This last option down here, Use Anti-Aliasing, doesn't really apply for newer versions of Inkscape. In older versions of Inkscape, if you're using rounded objects like circles, the pixels around the object would appear jagged if anti-aliasing were turned off. What anti-aliasing does is add semi-transparent pixels around the object to make it appear more smooth. However, like I said, this isn't an issue with newer versions of Inkscape, but in older versions and in raster graphics software, you can clearly see the difference between graphics with and without anti-aliasing. There are other things we can change in the Document Properties dialog, such as settings for guides and grids, but we will talk about these things later, so let's just close out the dialog for now. And let's say we like the way our current document looks, and we want to save it as a template so we can use it again later. We can do this by going to File, Save Template. We can then give our template a name, such as Test Template, and we can add other information such as author and description. And if we plan to use this template very often, we can set this as the default template that Inkscape uses. Then whenever we start up Inkscape again, it will use this template instead of the default A4 page template. I'm just showing you an example of how to save a template here, and I don't actually plan to use this template later, so I will leave this option unchecked and click Save. Now if I go back up to File, New from Template, I now see Test Template in the list. If I click on it, then click Create from Template, it opens a new document using the test template. As you can see, when you save a template, Inkscape will store in the template all the canvas properties we changed, along with any drawings we made on the canvas. Okay, that's about it for canvas navigation and properties. See you in the next video.